Today, we are very excited to have Nick Robinson, who is the director and cinematographer, I believe, for the film Australia's Great Wild North, which we are now showing at the Imax 3D theater. So, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time in the morning tomorrow, I believe, for you, in the afternoon for us to talk about this amazing film.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really, it's fantastic to see this film going around the world in that way. It's really, really lovely to have it on your screens.
So talk a little bit about, the thought process leading up to this focus on a film set in the Northern Territory. What was it that motivated you and your team, a pretty small team actually, to focus on this region of Australia, kind of along the northern coast and the middle swath of the northern part of the country?
Sure. Like I've spent quite a lot of time filming around Australia, and the Northern Territory, the region that's featured in this film, is possibly the most exciting. It's as wild as a place can get. I believe it's probably the wildest place, the wildest tropical landscape on Earth anyway. There's only 15,000 people that live in the area we're in. It's an area that's, I don't know, a lot larger than many European countries. So it's a huge area with very few people, and it's still beautifully wild. And I had a lot of Indigenous friends that live up there. It's that land is still owned by the Indigenous communities that live in the north of Australia, and it has incredible wildlife. So making a film up there seemed like a no-brainer to me. It's really beautiful. Very few people have ever seen it, and it has these incredible wetlands, which are, I mean, they feature all through the film, and they feature our hero, the saltwater crocodile, which is a often maligned creature, but I love them. They're great, and they're really good for the place and the environment. And when you have saltwater crocodiles, you have a healthy swamp.
It's interesting that you mentioned the swamps, because to look at the trailer and some of the footage and the behind the scenes documentary that's also available online, it almost looks at first blush like you're looking at the Everglades. It's interesting to see this kind of weird parallel between this continent literally on the other side of the planet and something that maybe people here in the Southeast see a lot closer to home.
Yeah, well, wetlands are a fascinating place. I mean, I find them so incredible. They're so full of life, and I guess that's the water feature, isn't it? Water is life, and wherever you have water and warmth and all of those things, you end up with these incredibly productive environments. The saltwater crocodiles that live where we are, they're extremely dangerous. They're not at all like alligators. Are quite shy generally, whereas the Australian crocodile, if you get in the water, they're pretty fierce, and they grow to about 7 meters long. So they're a dinosaur killing machine that lives in these swamps. But as long as you stay out of the water, they're lovely to watch and incredible creatures to live around. So
I guess it's kind of a matter of respect and observe without necessarily getting in the water with them.
It is, yeah, and I guess a lot of this film is about, it follows a friend of mine, Barramundi Lewis, who unfortunately passed away a little bit just before the film was finished, but he's an Indigenous man from the Northern Territory, Arnhem Land, where this film is set, and the crocodile is his totem. And this story was him telling the story of his totem animal, and they have a very deep respect for the animal. So in fact, all of them, but the crocodile especially is one that holds a very high value in their culture, and they learn to live next to them and not do things that get you eaten.
You mentioned that you've done work in the Northern Territory, so this wasn't necessarily new ground for you. Anybody who visits Australia, though, especially from the States, you might step your foot into the outback. You might dip your toe in the water, so to speak. But most of the time, you're probably going to be, I guess, on the East Coast, where Sydney and Melbourne are. My geography is probably failing me, but you're probably not going to see this part of Australia. And from what you say, even if you live in Australia, you're probably not going to see this part. You may not see this part, even if you live there. So did you see in the course of making this film things about this part of Australia, the Northern Territory, that maybe surprised you, or did you come to know it better as a result of making this film?
Yeah, we spent we spent nearly a year in this remote area, and you're right to say it's like a lot of Australians don't get there. It took us 6 days of driving all day, every day to get there from Sydney. So that's about how far it is. It's a long way. Your average tourist doesn't make the journey, and once you get up there's not a lot of roads. It's a lot of four-wheel driving. So you're it's not the most commonly visited area, but it is such an incredible place, and it has this wonderful seasonality to it that between the wet season and the dry season, which is it goes from torrential rain and the most incredible flooding of huge areas to an arid landscape that's desert-like for 7 months of the year. So the creatures are incredibly well adapted, and these swamps are an incredible focus for wildlife in those dry times, because it's the last remaining water in what is essentially an Arizona-like environment for 6 months of the year. So yeah, it's a beautiful place, and I guess it's the seasonality that I love, and it's also the indigenous culture up there, which is so strong, and every cave and every mountain that you climb into and have a look around, you'll find evidence of the first people that have been there for 60,000 plus years living there, and you see a lot of that in the film too. So for me, it's that cultural connection of the people that live there, as well as this fascinating biological region of the world that has remained wild, where most of the world is now populated, farmed, and most of the areas like this that could be quite productive in the world have been taken over by humans, and we've sort of used them to make food, and this one piece of the world has stayed wild, and it's a wonderful thing.
It's pretty clear from what I've seen, just in the making of documentary, that you place pretty significant importance on exploring the Aboriginal people's deep roots in this part of Australia and the connection they have with the land. So did learning about that connection and sort of exploring that in the course of making the film, did that affect your own relationship with this part of Australia?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it affects my relationship with just about everything, really, whether it be there or anywhere else. But I was lucky enough to spend a fair bit of time up there, and over the last 10 years, I've been up there many times, and to go out with Aboriginal people and sit and look at a wetland is such a different experience. I come from a biology background. I'm a wildlife filmmaker, but to go out with them, they see the individuals, not the species. They see personalities in the individual animals themselves rather than a species as a whole, and they see the interactions between certain animals, which is so fascinating, because it's the same as us going to a cafe and sitting on a terrace and watching a bunch of people and calling them all humans and treating them like they're all the same, or going there and watching the different types and personalities and interactions and fascinating stuff that's different in every single swamp. And so that ability to see the detail of the connections between all the creatures and the relationships, if you like, is what really opened my eyes to the whole, to the natural world around you. Yeah.
So there's a special sort of experience that comes from seeing a film in IMAX on an IMAX screen. Was the idea always to film this film for giant screen, or did that sort of come in after the fact?
It was, and it was a real challenge. I'd made films up there before. They weren't. I couldn't repurpose those into IMAX because, as you know, the screen's huge. You need extremely high resolution, and you need 3D. So to make it great, we wanted to do it in 3D. So we literally went out. We built rigs that we could carry in four-wheel drive. So 3D cameras are extremely difficult things. Our main camera would weigh about 65 kilos. I'm not sure what that is in pounds, but
almost 150 pounds.
It's a small human that you've got to carry around, but it's not just a small human. It's also like carrying around a bunch of panes of glass. And when you try and carry that kind of stuff through the bush, which is, and in cars that are vibrating, it's really hard work. So it was a real challenge. We lived in a caravan, and we built these rigs. We tried to make them as robust as possible, and then we'd take them out into the field and try and film animals. And when you're trying to place a 150-pound camera in front of an animal, a lot of animals don't hang around, which is why it takes so long. You have to find pretty friendly animals to let you get that close and set up a camera like that. So it was a real challenge to shoot it for IMAX, but it was also a real pleasure. I mean, I love cinematography and I love a new challenge. So going out and doing this was a real an exercise in frustration and meditation, I guess. At the same time, you had to sort of overcome the technical difficulties every day to try and get there, and I think it worked out.
It's especially impressive considering how small the team was. I mean, I think the making of says there were just 3 of you. Is that right?
Yeah, three is the minimum we could do to move the camera around, and because you have to sort of supply your own food and live in a van, and it just, everything gets really expensive and really hard really quick. So we were 3, one person to carry the really heavy tripod and the other 2 to carry the camera. and we just lived in the bush and went out. It's also when you're filming animals, you don't want big crews when you're filming animals. It's it's intimidating for the animals to see large groups of people. They tend to run away from large groups. So yeah, it was a small crew, but I mean, what a wonderful thing to do, to go camping with cameras and film animals.
So does that apply to crocodiles too? Are crocodiles shy when it comes to cameras? Or I mean, you look at them and you think of them as being these big, massive apex predators.
They're shy when you want to try and get a good shot of them. They're really shy, but they're not shy. Like half the problem with filming them, as soon as you're in water and they're comfortable, that they've got the advantage, right? So it's as soon as they're in their element and then they're not shy at all. And then the biggest problem is having them not constantly bite your camera or attack the boat, or you want them behaving naturally. But the good thing was, again, my Indigenous friends up there, I'd ask them, I said, I need really, really quiet, friendly croc that we can work with to get shots of it behaving naturally, one that's not going to attack the boat every day. And they could tell me the river bend, 300 kilometers away, there's one I know of that's really nice and he lives here, and you go and see that one. And then I want one that's going to bite the camera or jump out of the water or behave erratically and aggressively. And they go, oh yeah, go and see this one, he's really nasty. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, so they could tell you the personalities of the different crocs, and we would pick and choose the ones we work with. Even amongst the baby crocs that we had to film in this show, from about 10 or 15 baby crocs that we started with, it turns out there's sort of one or two that are workable. The other ones are just too feisty and hard to deal with.
Wow, you mentioned the biting the camera. There's a segment of that making of talking about a croc basically making off with a camera. I imagine that just from the size of the crew, the place you were working in, I mean, the ruggedness of the terrain, there have to be even more stories like that. Is there anything that stands out to you as especially memorable besides that croc swimming away with the camera?
Well, we've had quite a few cameras that went away with crocodiles. They've bitten off a few over the years. For me, I didn't get them all back. Luckily, this Imax one we did get back because it's a very expensive camera and a great shot. When you get eaten by a croc on an IMAX screen, it's like a wonderful thing. Yeah, look, we've had a lot of interactions. I mean, some of them are strange ones. There's buffalo in the Northern Territory, so we have large wild buffalo that were introduced 200 years ago, but they've been living wild up there for quite a while. And we had one interaction with the buffalo where I came around the corner and suddenly there was a buffalo and he was really angry and tried to kill me. And that was pretty fierce. I didn't know I could run so fast and so fast or so long. I think I ran for about half a K at a sprint. I did the 500 meters quicker than ever, and just managed to get away somehow. The buffalo tripped, luckily. But we've had quite a few, and the crocodiles is a constant thing. Sometimes it's you're moving through long grass and dealing with the baby crocodiles. You're moving through long grass where you can't see the mothers, and if mum's around, they're fiercely, they'll defend their nests, and we want to just film some babies, and that can be pretty scary. That's more like that movie Predator, where the thing's perfectly camouflaged and you can't see it, but you just see the reeds moving towards you. And, a lot of terrifying moments like that, the ones you can't see. Yeah.
So what do you think, are there moments in the film that you're especially proud you managed to capture, specifically thinking of it being on IMAX? So something that really translates well to in our case, a 6-story screen.
Yeah, look, I think some of those waterfalls that are up there have to be some of the most beautiful waterfalls on earth. And when you soar over one of those on an IMAX screen, that in 3D, that's such a wonderful, wonderful feeling. You do feel like you're a bird for a minute with some of those shots. And when you go through the living caves, which are these caves covered in art, and we went in there with a man he was in his 80s. And he grew up in this cave. He lived in it as a child, in the middle of nowhere. And so some of those environments are just so hauntingly beautiful. And in 3D on an IMAX screen, you really get that feeling that you're in there with them and that you're traveling through time. So, yeah.
So it seems like there are a lot of messages. I mean, just from the course of this conversation, it feels like there's kind of a message about the beauty that's kind of hidden away in this place that people have not really seen. There's obviously the connection with the Aboriginal people, and there's this whole through story about crocodiles and their sort of role in the environment. What do you want people to walk away maybe thinking about any of those things, about the Aboriginal people, about the Northern Territory itself, about saltwater crocodiles? I mean, what is your hope in terms of their takeaway?
Yeah, look, Balang, who narrates the film, the man who narrates this movie, he was a really good friend of mine, and he had this incredible connection to the natural world. And I think his desire when we set out to write this, it was very much knowing that he was going to be part of that and tell that story. And he really wanted to tell a story of connectivity, a story of love for the environment, and a story of caring for creatures, whether they be sort of, terrifying or cuddly. We tend to look after the things that are cute and that kind of thing, but crocodiles and lions and tigers are also important. So I guess his approach and the message of the film is one of just, fostering a love for nature and an interest in the deeper connections that are hidden in there.
You consider this to be kind of a high water mark for you as a filmmaker. So what is it about this film that sets it so high on your list of achievements as a cinematographer and a filmmaker?
Imax is such a wonderful tool. Those giant screens really do carry the viewer into a story. And so the impact of those films on the students and the kids and the school groups and, even the general audience, but really the school groups is so far-reaching and wide. And this film's been around the world, and it's showing to a huge number of students, and they're reaching out to touch crocodiles or getting to know someone's deep connection to the environment. So for me, it's a high point because the message is so strong. It's a high point because it's also so immersive that it really does have an impact. And when I've gone and sat in the theaters, I do sit up the back sometimes and watch some of the groups going through. I'm really proud that it's having an impact. Kids are walking out talking about it. They're excited. It's better than television, right?
On the far side of the planet, there's a wild land few people have ever seen. A land guarded by impenetrable sandstone peaks, sculpted by powerful forces of nature. Join Aboriginal elder Balang Lewis as he guides us across Australia's wild top end and reveals the incredible life story of his people's most sacred animal. Travel with us thousands of miles across the world's most remote wetlands to the oldest forest on the planet. This is the Australia you've never seen before, teeming with life, both deadly and adorable. It's a movie that's almost too big for the big screen. Australia's Great Wild North, now showing in this theatre.